This is Mark Richardson proving that he is quicker than the opposition's slowest member. This is something he did more than once. Challenge a slowpoke from another cricket team to a race. It seemed Richardson wanted to live down his nickname of Rigger, as in rigor mortis. This is him versus Darren Lehman. Yes, that is them jumping a keg of beer on their way. Richardson starts strong and powers away from Lehman. And note that Buff has a t-shirt on over his Kathy Freeman onesie running suit. Not Richardson. You can see every imperfection as he wins the race to be the fastest slow man. Mark Richardson was always this bizarre. He started as a bowler. His first class debut was against India. He batted at 10 and he took 3 wickets in the match with his slow left arm orthodox. I wonder who those oh my god. In his debut first class match, the man took the wickets of Kapil Dev and Sachin Tendulkar. In his first 19 matches for 2 different domestic sides and various development teams over a 3-year period, Richardson took only 22 wickets at 43. He did, however, average 21 with the bat, with 10 not outs and a high score of 34. He was kind of a nothing cricketer. Weirdly, his bowling was good enough to get out Sachin Tendulkar, but practically no one else. And he was good at not being dismissed, but not really making any runs either. At this stage, he probably wasn't ideally suited to professional sport. So he just went off, missed the 93-94 season, came back the following year as a batter. He never really bowled that much ever again. And in 94-95, when he turned back up for Otago, he was batting at number 4. Almost 5 years after his first class career began, he's now a batter. And he makes 122 from 311 balls batting at number 4. Then bounces around the middle order a fair bit, makes 100 against a touring West Indies side and averages 37 in the middle order over 4 years. But in 1998 he begins his career as an opener. He makes a duck in the first innings and 162 not out off 402 balls to be man of the match in the second. In his first 54 innings as an opener he was outstanding. That included a touring double hundred against Sussex and a triple hundred in Zimbabwe. For nearly 3 years he is an absolute stud, blocking balls, nudging ones, and being as hard to dismiss as he was as a number 10 all those years ago. Finally, New Zealand let him open for them, almost 11 years into his first class career at the age of 29. In Test cricket, he opens 38 times and he averages 45. And if that sounds ordinary, or just okay, then you have no idea what this mark means to New Zealand cricket. Mark Richardson has the 3rd most runs of any Kiwi opener, and the 4th best average of anyone who has done it for them more than 10 times. And if you believe, like me, that an opener's job is twofold, score runs and face as many balls as possible, well, of the New Zealand openers where we actually have all the balls that they have faced, Mark Richardson was unarguably in the top few opening batters that New Zealand has ever had. It is not up for debate. He is a giant of New Zealand opening, and it took them 11 years to get him to the top of the order. And that is because Mark Richardson is, such a strange dude. He almost never made friends with his teammates, which in a small cricket community like New Zealand is a bit of a big deal. And it's unclear how much he ever really loved playing the game. He retired after 4 bad tests. He was a bowler who became a batter. It took him 8 years of his professional career to actually find the thing he was best at. And he went on to host things like home improvement shows before becoming a right-wing opinion guy on TV and radio. Oh, and he got slapped down by the world's PM. And this is worth watching.
The question this is, and I think is a legitimate question for New Zealand, because she could be the Prime Minister running this country. She has our best interests at heart, so we need to know these things. If you're an employer of a company, you need to know that type of thing from the women that you're employing, because legally, you have to give them maternity leave. So therefore the question is it okay for a PM to take maternity leave while in...
Okay, elephant in the room is Mark Richardson. What do you want to say to him?
For me, no, because I opened myself up to it. But you... For other women, it is totally unacceptable in 2017 to say that women should have to answer that question in the workplace.
But this is my
point.
That is
unacceptable.
He retired at 33 because he just didn't want to be a cricketer anymore. He actually wanted to become a cricket commentator. And yes, there was all that running and costume. And think about what Richardson was trying to do there. Yeah, he was a little bit trying to be weird and funny, but he was also trying to prove that he was quicker than the opposition's slowest player. He wasn't trying to prove that he was fast, just not really slow. He wasn't trying to prove he was good, just trying to prove he wasn't shit. And that right there, a weird guy trying not to be shit, is the story of New Zealand opening batters. And I don't want you to think I picked Richardson because he was some weird anomaly. Let's just go straight to the top of the list and see what we get there. John Wright has made more runs opening the batting for New Zealand than anyone else. And before Tom Latham, he had almost double the runs of the next person on that list. Oh, and for fun, he also has the most runs by partnership and the second most runs by partnership. Yet even though he's the all-time leading run scorer for New Zealand openers, his overall runs just aren't that high. Of the top run scorers by nation, he only comes above Bangladesh, and maybe not for long, and Pakistan. Okay, that one could stand a little bit longer. So that explains two things: how good Wright is, and how much New Zealand openers have struggled over the years. But what about the weirdness? Well, this is the name of his book. Rarotonga is a tropical paradise in the Pacific, and John Wright had never been there. I know this because he made it clear in the opening paragraph of said book. Further into the book, there is a section on the farts of an Aussie umpire, and he dedicated the whole thing to his thigh pad. It should also be pointed out that one time he batted so well, he came off the ground and he glued his gloves onto the grip so he could replicate that feeling. New Zealand opening batters are so brilliantly bizarre. One of the reasons they are so weird is because it's a stupid job to do in New Zealand. Throughout the history of Test cricket, the only place worse than New Zealand is Ireland, from 4 tests. So basically no one. Opening in New Zealand is idiotic. You shouldn't do it. In order to want to be there, there has to be something wrong with you. This is the sole reason I am doing this video. It's not for Rigger's Baywatch moment or to mention John Wright's weird gloves. It's simply because opening the batting in New Zealand is one of the worst jobs in cricket, and it does very weird things to people. Because even though opening New Zealand is as bad as it gets, their openers are actually worse away from home. The only teams who are like that other than New Zealand are the ones who started cricket after 1990. And the Kiwi openers are the only sub-30 openers in the established Test world. What does this tell you? Are they so emotionally battered by opening in New Zealand that these psychological scars haunt them even on better wickets? Or is it that they don't learn the basics, because opening the batting in New Zealand is so much harder than everywhere else? 27 opening batters have played over 10 tests in that position, and they don't have a single player with an average over 50, but over half of them average less than 30. And these are the guys they gave multiple opportunities to. But here is the really important one. In their history, they have been outscored per opener by 8.6 runs. That is shocking. I am shocked. And when you account for cricket since 1980 alone, which is when they actually became a very good team, they are still miles behind. I mean, look at Blair Pocock. He opened in 15 tests, despite the fact that he averaged under 23. After 10 tests, he was averaging 17. His career strike rate was 29. He never made 100, and he played in 7 series. For those of us who lived through Pocock, there was never any feeling like he was about to turn the corner. There is nothing in his first-class record that suggests any hope, and he was in and out of the team through injury. Everything was stacked against him, and yet he fought on. His standard innings was scoring 20 from around 60 balls. That's 10 overs of the new ball. He did a job, and he wasn't the only one. Hell, he wasn't even the only Blair. Only 2 Blairs have ever played Test cricket, and they did it back to back, and they both opened for New Zealand, and neither of them made any runs. Even if you combine the Blairs, they only just make one good opener. But this isn't to diss the Blairs. Blair Hartland averaged 26 in first-class cricket, and he had to play in the 90s, and comes from a historically oppressed country for openers. He averaged 16, and I kind of think he deserves a medal just for going out there. Pocock as well. Everything was against them, and they had to face just incredible bowlers back then. Gillespie and McGrath, Wasim and Wacker, Goff and Caddick, Murali and Vass, Srinath and Dev, Strang and Streak. And let me tell you a story about Blair Pocock. In 1997, he played his second last test, and New Zealand were rolled easily in the first innings by Goff and Caddick. England led by a bunch after the first innings, and New Zealand were batting in the second innings after tea on day 3, with 2 days and change to bat out. Pocock made it to day 4. There was a little bit of rain that day, but still 49 overs bowled. Pocock made it to day 5, where he was out just before lunch. Altogether, he batted 335 minutes over 3 days when he was finally out. New Zealand lost by an innings and 85 runs. Looking back, that innings just doesn't matter. But sometimes the victory is in the fact that you keep going. Pocock might go down as one of the worst New Zealand regular openers because of his low average, but for him, Heartland, and even the non-Blairs. They weren't ever going to make lots of hundreds or go down as legends. And yet they batted for days, for balls, for whatever they could. A battling opening story may not seem too weird for you, so let's go in a completely different direction. A battling opening story may not seem too weird for you, so let's go in a completely different direction. Danny Morrison was a fairly famous tailender. This was a period when we had a lot of sensationally bad tailenders, and so Morrison often batted at number 10, and only ended up at number 11 a quarter of the time. And one of those times he batted for 133 balls to draw a match. But as you can see, he also jumped around the order a fair bit, and that's because he was also a night watchman. But that's not the most striking thing about Danny Morrison's batting. He once opened for New Zealand. And it wasn't to be a night watchman, which would be weird enough. Now, Danny Morrison is a test opener because New Zealand needed 2 runs to beat India, and they sent out 2 tailenders for a laugh. The Kiwis were playing club cricket in a test, and it meant that the man who would become a world-famous bunny was the last New Zealander to open the batting and bowling in a test match. But that's not the record we want to focus on. Danny Morrison once held a world record in test cricket for his batting. The most ducks. A duck every second match. And he opened the batting. Because of course he did. This is New Zealand.
G'day, Danny Morrison here. New Zealand opening batsman extraordinaire from a bygone era, Jarrod Kimber, tells me that really this is only episode 1 about some specialist openers. So more tales, chats and trials and tribulations from JK. So keep posted. Stay listening.